the Reimagining and Resilient India. Now, it gives me immense pleasure and privilege to introduce you to the stellar panel that we have today along with us. I'll start with possibly an alphabetical order. So let me first introduce Aparna, Ms. Aparna Mangla, who is the lead of Shell Foundation in India. As some of you might be aware, the Shell Foundation has been working on access to modern form of energy as well as sustainable mobility for a number of years, and have been investing and supporting enterprises as well as the entire ecosystem in various geographies across the world. And Aparna brings in all that wealth of experience here today for our discussion. Next, we have Gaurav. Gaurav Kumar is the co-founder of Claro Energy, which is one of the leading decentralized energy enterprise in the country, with a particular focus on solar for irrigation, as well as for various other services in the rural India. Gaurav has been instrumental in developing particularly irrigation as a service model, which we'll hear more from him for the agricultural needs of our farmers. Next, we have Honorable Shree Navdeep Segarraji, who is the Additional Chief Secretary for MSME as well as Khadi Village Industries for the Government of Uttar Pradesh. Mr. Segal has been instrumental in enabling a resilient growth of MSMEs in the state and making UP a hub for production. In fact, during the pandemic itself, Khadi Village Industry Board has produced and sold more than 40 lakh face masks built out of Khadi cloth. And he has an overall experience of more than 28 years in various administrative roles as one of the officers of Indian Administrative Services. Next, we have Parifan, who is the director of Power and Climate Program at the Rockefeller Foundation, based out of Bangkok. Parifan oversees the foundation's initiative in the Asia geography, where he has been working and been instrumental in setting up an initiative called Smart Power India, which is the Rockefeller's flagship initiative on bringing access to modern form of electricity for rural communities, particularly for economic and social development. And he has been also overseeing the foundation's work in Myanmar. Finally, we have Ms. Ramakannan, who has been a coach and a mentor for now few decades in her life. She's today representing Beyond Capital Fund, which is one of the impact funds focused on social impact in India. As a board member of Beyond Capital, she has been instrumental in focusing on various strategic investments for the fund. With that, let me just quickly set the context for the discussion today, and we'll, without further ado, quickly dive into the conversation. Now, as we're staring at this pandemic, which has not just impacted our public health, our individual lives, but also the larger economy, there is a clear need for us to build back, but build back probably better, be more resilient, be more sustainable as we think about the economic recovery, the overall societal recovery. And as we look at various parts of our society, various parts of our economy, MSMEs and small livelihoods particularly play a very critical role. They are in many ways the backbone of our country, even though many a times their numbers did not get captured well in the formal economy because of the nature of the sector. But in terms of livelihood, they are one of the largest livelihood generators in the country after agriculture. And in this context of MSMEs and the context of building resilience among MSMEs, one of the particular enabler is access to modern form of energy, access to reliable electricity. While this is by no means a sufficient ingredient to drive the economic activity, it is certainly a very, very critical enabler. And that's what we are going to deliberate on in today's conversation. And as someone who has been working on access to modern form of energy for the last 7 to 8 years, I can easily vouch for the amazing progress that the country has made over the last few years on electricity access front. Not just in terms of numbers of electricity connections, but also in terms of quality of supply. We have seen significant improvements over the years. In fact, we track this on our own through various primary surveys that the council conducts over the years. And fortunately, just before the lockdown, we completed our latest round of survey, which we are calling India Residential Energy Survey. where we surveyed about 21 Indian states, covering almost 97% of Indian population, to understand what is the current state of electricity access as well as consumption in the country. And it's heartening to see that now the average rural supply across the country has improved up to 20 hours per day. And while that is the average number, we know that average actually hides a lot of other nuances underneath. There is still a fourth of the Indian population, particularly rural population, that is receiving less than 16 hours of supply. Uh, and there are more than 4 million micro enterprises in rural India that mention that the lack of reliable electricity is the biggest bottleneck to their business. Now, with this backdrop, what at the council what we have been doing is tracking how we can really use and leverage modern form of energy, particularly decentralized renewables and clean energy efficient solutions to power livelihoods in rural areas. We see an opportunity of more than 50 billion US dollars to actually power rural livelihoods. And in order to really catalyze that particular market opportunity, along with Wilgrow, which is one of the oldest and largest social enterprise incubator in India, we have started a $3 million program, which was only a month ago was formally inaugurated by Honorable Minister Shri Piyush Goyalji, where we are providing capital as well as technical assistance to enterprises who are deploying these solutions on the ground to help them deploy them not just in tens and thousands, not just in tens and hundreds, but in thousands, so that we can really prime this market up and then the commercial investors and financiers can take on from there. With that background, I'll now straight away dive into the discussion. And maybe I'll first request Gaurav to come in because he is one of the practitioners and is being on the ground more than any one of us, despite the lockdown, despite the challenges that we have been seeing. And Claro, as some of us might be already aware, has operations across 14 different states in India. And they have been working with the rural communities for almost a decade. So Gaurav, let me start with just trying to understand from you, from your perspective, based on the experience of you and your colleagues, how do you see the economic situation, particularly on the ground, in particular for your customers who have been taking services through your microgrids, through your irrigation facilities, and so on? If you can just paint an initial picture, which we can take forward for the subsequent discussion.
Thanks, Vijay. I think there is nothing different than what we are seeing in the urban sector as well. Rural sector also going through a lot of distress. But also at the similar time, I can see like the people who's already using our solar pumps, or maybe they are getting like a Kusum scheme, which is also rolling up. So in that also, people are getting those pumps and everything. But two things, like we are also doing like conserving the cash and not spending more on the capital investment. They are all that changes also we can see in a rural area as well. People are very conservative. They don't want to spend so much money right now. All the equipment base, whether it's because mostly you are working with the farmers, so farmers are not buying any equipments right now. They are holding their cash because they are also seeing whatever, because it's a digital world, so it's not like we are holding any information here and nothing is passing on to the rural villages. So there also that all informations are there, and people are very conservative in spending the money. So that's the one trend we are seeing it. So instead of like people are buying our pumps, now they are going more onto the service model and trying to get as low as they can spend on the irrigation or maybe other productive use. One another thing which is also comes while because of this, there's a reverse migration also happens. So we mainly work in UP, Bihar, and MP. So where we have seen a lot of reverse migration, and that's why there's a lot of talents is also available in the rural areas. So that is one another things which we earlier we used to, when we are doing irrigation as a service for maintenance of any of the pumps or anything, we have to go to the nearest districts. Now you can nearby in 2-3 villages you can find a good mechanics and they can ready to work on pay as you go basis. Whenever we require, they come and they're doing it. So that's also we can see a lot of changes in the rural sector, which is, and that's mainly because as everybody knows, that COVID, the fear overrules the desire. So everybody is like, they wants to stay at their home, try to be as close to as their family, and don't want to move away. So that's also affecting. So these are the things which we can see. And economic, as everybody knows, it's hurting a lot, because if you can see the farmer, which was supposed to do irrigation in these months, they normally avoid it. Some try to do, if they can go away with the some rains, or maybe some type of natural feeding. Then let's go away. Let's not do diesel pump sets or use solar water pumps or anything, because normally they are avoiding going outside the outside their houses and go to the field. So that's also, and that's effect in their yield production, because that's like another impact which we have seen in the rural villages, where farmers are facing reduction in their yield. So last year, whatever their yield, they are getting at the reduced production in their yield. So these are the things which really hurting the real economy, which is going through that places.
Thanks, Gaurav. I think this is, I mean, of course, the 2 points that you highlight. One is the risk awareness, sort of aversion that we are seeing in the rural community as well, which is, of course, not surprising. But to the extent that they are also foregoing irrigation as an input to the crops, and sort of taking on the challenge or the risk of actually lower yields, is quite something. And of course, at a material level, it will affect the incomes in the short term, but it can also probably have repercussions in the food security in the longer term as well. One thing I was curious, just before I move to some of the other panelists, that one thing that we have heard, that the actual cultivated area is increasing because of the reverse migration. Have you also seen any such patterns in the geographies that you have been working in, that the net cultivated area is actually going up?
Honestly, not, because this reverse migration only happens just now. So maybe we can see in the Rabi Fasal, which is going to be sowing will be started in another month or 2 months time. So then we can see it. But earlier we haven't seen such a large any changes in the
Right.
sowing and the.
Okay. So moving on from the micro enterprises or the end user to the enterprises in the energy and livelihood space, I'll now sort of turn my attention to Aparna, who have been supporting various enterprises in the energy and livelihood space in India. From your experience, Aparna, from the portfolio companies that you have, like what kind of challenges are the enterprises are struggling with? Of course, beyond the regular cash flow, which we have all come across, what are some of the peculiar challenges that they are struggling with, and how Shell Foundation and some other ecosystem supporters are trying to support them navigate through these challenges?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for the question. Yeah, so there have been a variety of challenges, and actually that's also dependent on the sector in which some of these companies are operating. So of course, in our portfolio, a lot of it is focused on just energy efficiency and to create livelihood opportunities around using these assets for productive use. So the models which have been mostly to do with the rural economy, I think many of them have actually faced much more demand, which is also a challenge in itself. It's a good challenge to have, but the challenge which they faced is that because of reverse migration, the demand for some of these appliances has gone up because of the people moving back to the villages. They might need more ways to earn income while they're there. And therefore, with that, it comes with another challenge of actually funding these companies for working capital and other forms of capex, for example, to expand their manufacturing or to strengthen their supply chains. So those kinds of challenges have come up, and to solve some of those, we have obviously given some form of emergency funding to some of the companies who were struggling with it, and another form, we've tried to solve the issue of working capital in a larger way in the overall ecosystem by partnering with the many other donors, other foundations, and also with government agencies as well, so that we can incentivize some of these lenders to be able to extend working capital for some of these businesses which are actually flourishing despite COVID. And on the other hand, we also have some of the enterprises, like for example, someone in the textile space, or someone in whose models are to do with sustainable modes of shared mobility, for example. So they have been struggling with demand for obvious reasons, and because these are not essential goods and services, and therefore the demand has just gone down manifold, almost became zero at the time of lockdowns. And even till now, I mean, we've seen that the economy is taking much longer to actually pick up, and there's increasing need for these organizations to pivot and to find alternative means of they need to change their business models, basically. So we have been helping them with the mentoring support, with the right kind of partnerships to be able to do that, and also emergency funding to do that. And with our partnerships and to play a larger role, a lot of other donors have come together with us to join hands and to support some of these sectors and these enterprises there. And also, I think one of the challenges which we have been seeing in the overall ecosystem is like for any of these organizations to scale up, one of the key point is asset financing. That is true for energy as well as for mobility. And given the moratoriums which are going to be ending soon now for some of them, and for some they've already ended, the lending has not picked up to a level where it was pre-COVID. So of course it's a challenge, and we have been looking to form some form of partnerships with other donors and foundations to see how we can kickstart this lending process, because this is key for some of these companies to scale up. And of course, cost cutting is definitely something which has been on top of mind of every enterprise. And I think, but the good thing is that even the just because this is on top of their mind, I think they will emerge stronger out of this COVID-19 crisis, just because their supply chains will be much more efficient and much more streamlined. So I think that's the silver lining. I think it's going to help them in the long run. So yeah, and I think in terms of what else we are doing, how we are trying to tackle it, I think I would just like to say that I think there's an increasing need for models such as demand aggregation and market linkages for these companies, because a lot of these models are very much fragmented. Their markets are very fragmented. So we are trying to look as to how we can create models which could bring demand. For example, plugging in logistics for sustainable mobility, and that could actually work for textiles also. So those kind of models would be very interesting to work with, and we continue to work with other partners to bring more funding into the sector.
Yeah, thanks, Aparna. So I think we now sort of heard both some of the challenges that the micro enterprises and the on-ground MSMEs are facing, and some of the challenges that some of the small and medium-scale enterprises who are trying to serve these micro enterprises are facing. I would now actually like to turn my attention to Mr. Segar. I think he's on another call, so we may have to wait for 10-15 seconds. But I actually wanted to understand that what is it that some of the state governments are trying to do when it is about supporting the MSME sector, and how they are trying to make this particular sector more resilient in this particular time. We may have to come back to him if this takes a little longer. Okay, let me come back to Mr. Segar. Okay, I think he is done. Mr. Segar, let me repeat my question.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So, Mr. Segar, what we were trying to understand from you in particular, I mean, given that you're representing one of the state governments, that what kind of support, what kind of efforts or initiatives or endeavors are being taken, particularly to support the MSMEs sector, given the vulnerability that this sector faces, especially the textile sector, etc., which are highly vulnerable for the cash flow challenges and so on. So if you could briefly elaborate from your perspective, how do you see this sector shaping up in the current context, and what are the efforts and endeavors that in particular UP government has been taking on this front?
I think I lost you in between, but anyway, see, I was hearing the other friends on the net. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you well.
Yeah, because in between the signal is, I think you see, the pandemic has affected the MSME sector badly, particularly the ones in unorganized sector. You see, we have almost 9 million MSMEs in UP, and 10% of them are in the formal sector, and 90% of them are in the unorganized sector, not informal. Although we are now doing a kind of a survey to exactly find out how many of them are there.
Okay, I guess there is some challenge with the connection at his end. Second, we have lost you.
The 100% capacity. We had recently done a survey, and because we've been able to do it only for the formal ones. 80% of the units are now operating between 80 to 100% capacity, and there were issues, but now they are getting sorted out. Now, see, it's not as bad as it was in the month of May and June. It is on a recovery path, and there are two things which show that the micro and even medium sector is now on back to recovery form. One is the total electricity consumption, power consumption by the industry is now almost at the same level as pre-COVID. So that means there is an activity in the industry. Second thing is our GST collections have now matched the last year's GST collections of the same month, of the current month. So that's quite an indication that the industrial activity is picking up. We as a government, we have been helping to, trying to help them in two ways. One is, many of them or most of them had the liquidity crisis. So we have been kind of following up with the banks to provide them the Government of India's Atmanirbhar package support, that is the emergency credit line. And the banks have been able to disperse it to 4.5 lakh units out of total 9 lakh formal units, and there are informal units which we are not able to keep track of. So banks have almost dispersed 10,400 crores, and we expect that the total 15,000 crores will be dispersed to the existing units as additional 20% as a emergency credit line support. And then during this time, we have been also following up with the banks for the financing of the new MSME units. And you'll be surprised, almost 3.74 lakh units have been sanctioned, loans worth 14,000 crore. Since we started this campaign from 14th May onwards, when the first lockdown opened. So that shows, people are, epidemic is there, yeah, but still people are getting back to the routine economic activity, and the shocks that have come will take a little time, but yes, currently it is now coming almost near to the normal. The other thing that we've been trying to help the MSME is to get their pending payments. A lot of MSMEs are getting affected by payments from the other suppliers, payment from government departments, and also their GST refunds and all those things. So we are working on that, and we have developed a app also to help them. Kind of, it is called MSME Sathi. Where people can put in their issues. So that way we are trying to kind of see, as the Prime Minister is saying, from local to global, and see, we are now, it's a kind of opportunity where governments have been working to relax a lot of laws and issues that have been coming in the way of setting up industry, like labor laws have been relaxed. Now we have come up with a new MSME Act, where an MSME, to set up an MSME, you just have to file 4 or 5 papers, and then you will get an acknowledgement letter within 72 hours of your filing. And with that letter, you can go and set up your unit, and you don't have to worry for next 1,000 days. After 1,000 days, in between that time, you have to get your permissions and whatever acts are needed. But you can set up a unit without any much hassle. So these things are, coming. We are working on these things to, kind of create an ecosystem where the economic activity is, gathers speed or gets started on a new thing.
Yeah.
I was the two things more that I thought I will let you know. We worked with the self-help groups of the Rural Livelihood Mission, and we gave them the khadi clothes, and they made almost 50 lakh khadi. I am wearing one of them, the khadi mask, and they've been now, government of UP is giving subsidy on this, and we are selling this mask, although cost of it is around 12 rupees per mask, but we are giving it at 5 rupees. Remaining is being compensated by the state government. So that way we've been able to kind of generate livelihoods during this pandemic also, to diverted their energies to this economic activity. And I see other thing that we were working with the solar energy, is that on a sustained basis we have been trying, although our energy department says that all the villages are connected, but there may be still some areas which are off grid. Trying to, few districts we are working with the UNEP to locate such village industries, smaller industries, which can be given which will be connected to the solar power locally. Also, we are giving solar charkhas to our this thing. And last year we gave almost 2,000 solar charkhas. This year also we'll give more than 2,000 solar charkhas. So trying to work on these to kind of not only increases their per day wages from weaving, also it creates a sort of an energy sufficiency system. Now we are working on providing looms to the workers. See, we have a lot of workers, weavers in Varanasi and other areas where they are working on power looms. They have an issue over power rates. Power is costlier, and the government had been giving subsidy to them. But now now we are working with dairy to provide them solar looms, so that their dependence on routine regular energy is decreased, and they start using solar power. So these are the few things that I think that we are using, and we will be very happy to support or get support or collaborate with any of the institutions to kind of reach to the artisans and address their livelihood issues with the help of solar energy or any other initiative that we have large number of artisans working for khadi, and now we are connecting them to our production centers, modernizing those production centers so that we get a good quality khadi products made.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abhishek.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sehgal. I think you have preempted a couple of my questions, which I'm actually going to follow up with you on. But it's great to hear. I might come back with one or two follow-ups that I have, but I'll now sort of try and loop in Rama into the conversation, particularly from an investor's perspective, that how some of the impact investment funds, including Beyond Capital, are looking at the current situation. Is there also risk awareness aversion there as well, in terms of now taking on any new bets, or even to support some of the existing bets you are making? And also, if there are any interesting experiences, examples from your portfolio where enterprises have tried to do something to ensure that they are not only resilient but also thriving in this particular challenging time, particularly from the energy space. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Abhishek, for those two questions as I see it. One, whether we are, as investor, are we looking at continuing to invest, impact investing space? We are actually. So we are, and I do know that, the couple of other organizations that I know well in the same space are also continuing to do so. We see the need for it. We see some of the organizations actually, as you said, thriving. And in many, while we may not go in for, even though we have actually invested in two companies after the COVID situation had started. Two in India, two in East Africa as well. So third, we are still doing the due diligence on that, but we're keen on doing it. But we are continuing to actually support some of our organizations which have obviously been negatively impacted by the COVID situation. So some of the funding we have agreed to give some follow-on funding for them to be taking on. We have worked with them personally to ensure that they're doing some cost-cutting measures. What are the different ways of operationalizing their work, etc. So a lot of hand-holding has been happening with some of our portfolio companies. But interestingly, any of our LPs, people who put in money into our fund, have been very generous, have been open about continuing to fund. They are interested in seeing that, where is the impact that is going to be needed. I think in the impact investment space, people have come in to basically see where the impact is. While they see that there is so much of effect, especially in the base of the pyramid, people have come forward to add on to their investment. Honestly, we have not seen that. Yes, I mean, of course, some of the enterprises have really suffered. Where we have seen in East Africa, one of the organizations had to actually close down, while we saw that it will not be able to survive in the next 6 months. But wherever possible, where we see that there is, once there is revival in the economy, there is a lot of possibilities for that organization, for that sector to actually boom. We've continued to invest and be helping with that sector. And I've seen that with the other organizations as well, whether it is Unitas, Avishka, any of the others. Beyond Capital has continued to do that, and so have the few of the other companies. In terms of whether we have seen I can talk about one of our portfolio companies. I mean, Frontier Markets, which some of you may know, among the earliest pioneers in energy and livelihood, based out of Jaipur and Rajasthan, started with distributing solar products to the villages, including maintenance of it, etc. So they do through a model called Solar Sahelis, where they work with village women, some entrepreneurs who would go door to door and sell some of these products, which could be home, power solutions for the home through solar, or even for the farmers, etc. So Ajayta Shah, who's the founder, has been quite amazing and has been extremely quick in seeing what could be done. Among the first things that she did was to set up, like in a corporate way, to set up what is called a war room, ensuring that all her top management is there to understand where are her customers, who's going to be affected. She used the same Solar Sahelis to go ask her end consumers, to ask them exactly like any forward-thinking corporate would be doing, in going and asking them what is it that they now need, what is lacking in their in their household, and what could they do better, what is needed by them. So it was a very, very quick survey, and she used the same channel. She didn't have to use any other research agency for it. She just used her own Solar Sahelis to actually go door to door to ask, expand. And the second she did was, when she got back that what are the new products that that some of them may be needing. They were not willing to perhaps invest in some other product, but they needed essentials, which some of them were not coming forward. She quickly established, she had been talking to some of the FMCG companies. She quickly established some channels, said, okay, these can be distributed by the same, logistics, the presence that we can do that. knowing fully well that it may not happen later, it may not be cost effective for her to actually do it later. But she was also clear that if you don't have a short term, you will not have a long term. So you need to ensure that, you know, your people are employed, you are able to go and do what is needed by the end consumers, extremely consumer centric in that way, and has actually phenomenally grown with that. You know, among the few companies I would say who's actually grown, even of course she ended the last year with whatever target she had, and she has continued to be doing more. So the bottom line has been affected, but her growth has been there. And seeing the way she has, a lot of other FMCG companies have been interested in partnering with her and going forward. So I would say, and of course, they took the hard call on the top management, starting with her taking a 50% salary cut and seeing what is needed so that you know, she doesn't have to actually get rid of people, redeployed people, and seeing, you know, where is the need, how should people be. So it was not job titles, but people started doing whatever is needed by the end consumers. So it's been a great learning, great to see how she's grown and what she's doing. So that's one organization which has done well. In the energy space, I would say we have another in the health space, which is actually thrived as well. Again, based out of Rajasthan, in telemedicine, based out of Udaipur, and offering like a hub and spoke model. You know, they've been having clinics in villages, and their doctors in Udaipur, or actually now spread out of India. And more people have actually started going into the clinics, you know, and online. You know, the initial one is done by the nurse, and then the doctor comes on through a Skype and is able to, even specialists, they've been expanding into that as well. So a couple of organizations which have really thrived and seeing what is possible. So I think you just need to not look at just the problems and seeing where is the opportunity. And entrepreneurs who have been willing to not sit on their laurels and starting to actually go out into the market and do some ground level work, they've actually been thriving, and who are completely consumer focused have actually been doing well.
Yeah.
So
thanks, Rama. I think one common thread that I'm hearing from all the conversations so far is that while of course there's distress, there are challenges, but there are also some silver linings. I mean, some positives are emerging across the board, whether it is on the ground, whether it is with MSMEs and so on. Now let me bring in Parifan, who has been waiting for a while, into the conversation, and particularly also take the conversation beyond India and also a little bit into the international perspective. So Parifan, I mean, Rockefeller Foundation in particular has been a champion of how to leverage modern form of energy for development across the board, whether it is economic, whether it is social. How do you see the current crisis sort of panning out, but panning out in a way that it can actually create new opportunities for the clean energy space in order to really build more resilient economies, more resilient societies? If you could just share your perspective on that.
Abhishek, thank you for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to be on this panel along with other panelists. I mean, certainly when you look at the kind of the global picture, the lack of access to affordable and reliable electricity is one of the greatest challenges of our time. We're talking about 800 million people who still don't have access. And even those who already have access, you know, we're talking about 1 billion people who have access to electricity from the grids or other sources, their electricity is not reliable to power their businesses. So that's the major hindrance to the subject here in this conversation we have today about equitable access for livelihoods. And you look closer at it and, you know, look at the consumption. Consumption is so inequitable across the world, 47 least developed countries. The average person uses barely enough electricity to power 2 light bulbs, 6 hours a day, and charge a mobile phone. And to think about that, you know, how to solve the problem, bringing power to 800 million people by just relying on grid would cost, you know, based on the estimates here, around $490 billion. But how would this be possible in this challenging economic situation, right? And as a result of COVID-19 pandemic crisis, governments have far fewer resources to devote to expanding rural notifications, and rural farmers and communities have far less money, as other speakers have talked about, to spend when grids arrives. But going down this pathway would create climate disasters also, because fossil fuel projects contribute to a significant share to grid electricity. You talked about the opportunities on the other side. What can be done? I mean, thanks to the pioneering breakthroughs in the distributed renewable energy technologies, today we have things like mini-grids, solar mini-grids, or other renewable energy sources that could really accelerate electrification in rural areas in Asia and in Africa. It's faster to build, it's cheaper, it's more reliable. A typical 30 kilowatt or 50 kilowatt in some areas can serve a single village, can now be installed in less than a month. We have 400 examples of this in India that we're engaging in support in UP, Jharkhand, and Bihar, but many others in Africa and Myanmar. These systems provide grid-like powers that open new opportunities across the healthcare, the agriculture, small business sectors in emerging markets. But what can really be done in this challenging time? I like the other speakers that talked about investment in the agriculture. What needs to happen is to align the agricultural and rural notification planning together. Quite often the planning doesn't go hand in hand, and we've seen quite an example of that. So powering livelihoods requires coordinated approach among many actors, from the producers to power companies to value chain actors to governments and many others. And we're working with the World Bank and governments and other donors, including Shell Foundation, to align some of these efforts so that when these investments could converge in communities and enable farmers and micro enterprises to fully benefit from productive use electrification, SME loans, and other development programs. I think it's really important also to think about the financing gap. Meeting these basic needs of the 800 million people living without electricity will require doubling global investments in distributed renewable energy from $11 billion a year to $22 billion per year. In this climate, we need to really mobilize blended public and private financing to expand capital available for these companies, and large-scale results-based financing schemes that take a coordinated funding approach from grid expansion to mini-grids and solar systems. The last point that I would like to say is to really advance technologies, bring the costs of this system much further down, so that the projects are much more financially viable and attractive to investors. And most importantly, be able to offer lower tariff to end consumers.
Yeah, thanks, Pariphan. I think you've touched on a very important point, and maybe I'll use that to sort of do a quick round of final inputs from everyone, because we are also about the time. That while we all sort of buy into the idea, and of course we are probably a group of converts, but even if you talk outside this cohort, we all buy into the idea that yes, the pathway for recovery has to be more sustainable than what it has been so far. That there is an immediate need to sort of think of green recoveries and resilient recoveries. But the funding flows, the financing, the investments, the level at which you need it, and the actual funding flows, there is a significant gap, right? And that chasm needs to be bridged. So what is it that it would take, and what, from each one of our perspective, whether we are an entrepreneur, whether we are an ecosystem supporter, whether we are an investor, what is it that would take for us to start making that jump? to start looking at more risky opportunities, so to say, even though in the long run we know that these are going to pay off well. But how do we unlock that support? So if each one of you can just share one particular thought, and I'm kind of putting all of you on the spot here, but if just one particular thought, that what would it take for us to unlock that support, whether it is in the form of policy, whether it is in the form of investments, whether it is in the form of financing, which can help us accelerate this recovery, or rather a more resilient recovery. Can we start with Gaurav again?
Yeah, thank you, Abhishek. I think one thing which I can see, and what everybody also has mentioned, the recovery path is very good. We are also recovering very well. We have come to the pre-COVID level as well. So our revenues, our profitability, everything is online. Now everything is in line and everything is going well. Now the one thing which really required some of the effort is like providing the capital for the rural area. Why I'm talking this? Because as I told you earlier, all the buying decisions are on hold. So when that is on hold, nobody wants to buy those things. Nobody wants to spend money on those equipments. But what they want is like what we do as irrigation as a service. So people are more tending towards the buying those services instead of buying the pumps. So I think for that, and also now you understand the banking scenario currently, it's also like very, especially in the rural sector when you're working, it's little bit conservative right now. So we required some of the real patient capital which can really push the company like us who wants to really invest in service pay-as-you-go models, or service as a software as a service, or maybe some other service models where we can really fund those capital investments, and then we can work on the service model. So I think from my perspective, that's the only thing which can really drive in a rural area, which as far as we are concerned.
Yeah. I think we need to learn from Mr. Sehgal that how they have unlocked 14,000 crore during this pandemic for asset financing, and probably bring some of those learnings into the agriculture sector as well. Aparna, what would be your one, so to say, silver bullet, even though I don't believe in silver bullets, which can help us unlock support for the sector?
Yeah, okay. I think right now I feel that given that the economy is in a flux in a way, I mean, some companies are thriving, but some of them are not. And I think with investors also, they have been like mixed strategies. A lot of them have been focusing their capital on their existing investing companies rather than investing in new. I think, one need of the hour, or the one silver bullet I would say, is like need for more collaboration and need for blended finance. For different kind of funders to join hand and to take different levels of risk that they're comfortable with, and that is what we feel will kind of bring the sector to a level where they can get adequate fit for firm kind of funding. But at the same time, it is something which is, like things like guarantees, for example, or other blended forms of financing, like securitization. I think those kind of things I feel can be a good way given the economic environment.
Yeah. Thanks, Aparna. So we have heard capital, we have heard collaboration. Let's see if there are further C's in the list. Maybe I'll probably jump.
Exactly what I would say. The collaboration between the partners is really crucial. Because there is a lot of learning that each of the partners has, and they are coming in from different. And I'm talking about where there is like Shell Foundation or Rockefeller, which are, some of them are giving loans. Or unsecured or secured loans, and there are people like us who are giving some investments, but there's different learning to be had by just getting onto a platform and seeing what is possible to be done. So I know in the social sector, they've non-profit sector, they've already started talking about doing some of these platforms and partnerships. I know one called COVID Action Lab, which has been doing really phenomenally well, just trying to bring in all the stakeholders who are involved in the sector, trying to see, who are the partners, who are the funders who want to be invested in, getting to understand who are the nonprofits who are working on the ground, how do you connect them. So something to that effect, if we are able to bring together to see what is the need, even the research, those consulting organizations which do amazing designing those solutions, a lot of them have been just sitting in the bucket. So
Abhishek, sorry to interrupt. Actually, I have to go somewhere for a meeting. It is overstretched by your time, but you can continue. I'm very happy if you can share my email with anybody, and the state government will be very happy to collaborate and cooperate in any of the programs run by all of you, including Mr. Gaurav Kapoor. We have no issue, working with the private entities. So thank you so much. It has been quite a learning experience, and I hope that we stay in touch with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sehgal. We
Thank
really
you, sir.
appreciate your time today. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Thanks a lot, sir. So that's basically it. The collaboration and the capital both together. What is the possibility of doing that? Getting onto a platform, perhaps, understanding what we have learned. Each of us have been learning with our portfolio companies, whether any of those could be modified and iterated, used by others. So that's what I would actually urge all of us to be looking at.
Yeah. Okay, so Parvan, maybe the final words from your end in terms of what do we really need to unlock the support?
I agree with both Rama and Apana on blended capital. And I think it's key because using the blended capital to bring in large scale private sector or even sort of medium-sized third sector to help set up these mini grids in rural areas would be key to success in terms of powering livelihoods. Last year, we had a partnership with Tata Power that they wanted to build up to 10,000 mini grids for the next few years. And that's phenomenal. And that I think is a smart way of using limited capital that we have today in attracting more players to this space. And the last thing I would say is that, as governments and countries are coming up with an economic recovery plan, we're working with others to make sure that the distributed renewable energy solution is part of the infrastructure plan, and that countries are thinking about ruralification and not just simply, electrifying major cities in their own countries.
Yeah. Right. So with those, I think clearly, collaborations and capital, or maybe collaborative capital, is what seems like the flavor of the day.
Yeah.
And I think one thing is for sure that we need to probably go beyond collaborations only between, let's say, private entities. There's a clear need I can see, even as Parifan mentioned, like working closely with some of the governments, especially where the infrastructure is still getting developed. So we make sure that the infrastructure itself is resilient in nature, is sustainable in nature. I think with that, I, of course, will not be able to do a good justice to the breadth of conversation that we have had today. Hearing from practitioners to investors to ecosystem supporters to foundation and the government himself. I would thank you again, every one of you, so that you could share your perspectives and thoughts with us and enrich this discussion. We do hope that we can take the message of the collaborations and the capital or the collaborative capital forward and can come up with actually a platform which can make this work on the ground. With that, I thank you all once again, and I thank you all the listeners. Sorry we couldn't take any questions because of the paucity of time, but we hope that has been an enriching discussion for you all. Thank you everyone.
Thanks, Abhijit. Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.